Hi there. Welcome to NapTime History channel. Tonight we're about to explore one of history's most absurd survival scenarios. You're standing in a misty field at dawn, your hand trembling around the handle of a silver spoon. Yes, a spoon, while 20 paces away, a very confused aristocrat grips a proper dueling sword. The morning dew soaks through your boots as you realize you probably won't survive this, but at least you'll die in the most ridiculous way possible. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment letting me know where you're listening from and what time it is there. I love seeing how far these bedtime stories travel. Now, let's drift back in time. The whole mess started yesterday at Lord Pemberton's tea party. You're nibbling cucumber sandwiches, minding your own business, when you accidentally suggest that his new wig looks like a diseased badger. It's an honest observation. The thing genuinely appears to be suffering from some sort of follicular plague. But apparently, in 1794, comparing a gentleman's hairpiece to woodland roadkill constitutes a grave insult. Lord Pemberton's face turns the color of overripe beetroot. His monocle pops out with such force it nearly takes out a nearby servant. "Sir," he sputters, spraying tea across the Persian rug, "I demand satisfaction." The room falls silent. Even the grandfather clock seems to pause its ticking. You're still processing what just happened when Pemberton's glove strikes your cheek with surprising velocity. The sting is less painful than the realization that you've just been challenged to a duel. Your mind races through every fencing lesson you've never taken, every sword you've never held, every fighting technique you've never learned. Around you, the other guests pretend to study their teacups with fascinating intensity. Lady Whitmore's fan flutters so rapidly it creates a small breeze. Colonel Fitzgerald clears his throat and mutters something about the weather. Nobody meets your eyes. In polite society, refusing a duel marks you as a coward for life. Accepting it might mark you as dead by tomorrow. "I accept," you hear yourself say, though your voice sounds like it's coming from very far away. Pemberton nods curtly. "Tomorrow at dawn, Hampstead Heath. Choose your weapon." This is where everything goes spectacularly wrong. See, traditionally, the challenged party selects the weapons. You could choose pistols, giving you at least a fighting chance of survival through poor marksmanship on both sides. You could choose swords and hope for a minor flesh wound before honor is satisfied. But your brain, overwhelmed by panic and too many cucumber sandwiches, experiences what historians still argue was either a stroke of genius or a complete mental breakdown. "Spoons," you blurt out. The word hangs in the air like a confused butterfly. Pemberton blinks. "I beg your pardon?" "Spoons," you repeat, with more confidence than any human has ever had while selecting cutlery for combat. "I choose spoons." The legal precedent for your choice is murky at best. Technically, the Code Duello, the accepted rulebook for gentlemanly murder, states the challenged party may select any weapon. Most assume this means choosing between various implements designed for killing, but nowhere does it explicitly forbid kitchenware. This loophole has sparked debates among scholars for centuries, though mainstream historians insist you're simply the first person stupid enough to test it. Pemberton's second, a thin man named Ashworth, steps forward. Sir, surely you jest. Spoons are not proper dueling weapons. The code says any weapon, you counter, surprising yourself with this sudden legal expertise, unless Lord Pemberton wishes to withdraw his challenge. It's a clever trap. If Pemberton refuses your weapon choice, he appears cowardly. If he accepts, he has to figure out how to duel with a spoon. His face cycles through several shades of purple before settling on resigned fury. Very well, spoons it shall be, though I warn you, sir, I shall bring the sharpest spoon in my possession. As you leave the tea party, whispers follow in your wake. Some call you mad. Others suggest you're brilliant. Most agree you'll be dead by tomorrow regardless. Your own second, your childhood friend Thomas, who you've conscripted for this role, pulls you aside. Have you completely lost your mind? Possibly, you admit. But think about it. How does one even duel with spoons? Thomas stares at you. That's exactly the problem. How does one duel with spoons? Thomas drags you back to your lodgings, muttering about finding you a good surgeon for tomorrow. But you're already fixated on a more pressing concern. Which spoon? Your landlady, Mrs. Pembroke, no relation to your nemesis, thankfully, maintains a respectable cutlery drawer. You spread the contents across your dining table like a medieval weapons merchant displaying his wares. The soup spoons seem too unwieldy, their broad bowls catching the lamplight like tiny shields. Dessert spoons feel insubstantial. You might as well show up wielding a thimble. The teaspoons are right out, even in your panicked state. You recognize that arriving with something designed for stirring sugar would push absurdity into outright mockery. Your fingers hover over a serving spoon, its elongated handle offering reach, but Thomas shakes his head. Too aggressive, you'll look like you're trying to serve him pudding. You settle on what Mrs. Pembroke calls her good tablespoon, a solid silver piece inherited from her grandmother. It has heft without being ostentatious, a respectable length, and a bowl shallow enough to what? You still have no idea what one does with a spoon in combat. Perhaps, Thomas suggests, pouring himself a generous brandy, we should consider the defensive properties. A spoon could deflect. Deflect a sword? You interrupt. Thomas, it's a spoon. It deflects soup. He drinks deeply. Then we focus on confusion. No one's ever faced a spoon-wielding opponent. Pemberton won't know whether to thrust, slash, or laugh himself to death. There's a fringe historical theory that spoon dueling actually existed in 13th century Mongolia, where warriors would fight with sharpened ladles to settle disputes over fermented mare's milk. But most scholars dismiss this as a mistranslation of texts describing ritual soup-sharing ceremonies. You briefly consider claiming ancient precedent before realizing that citing imaginary Mongolian spoon combat might not strengthen your position. You spend the next hour practicing various stances in your mirror. The classical fencing position looks ridiculous when your weapon hand clutches tableware. You try holding it like a dagger, but that seems to invite jokes about dining etiquette. Eventually, You develop what you call the cutlery guard, spoon held at middle height, bowl facing outward, your other hand behind your back, as if you're a waiter presenting the wine list in Hell's Own restaurant. What if, Thomas says, now on his third brandy, you use the reflective surface to blind him, catch the morning sun, create a diversion. It's supposed to be cloudy tomorrow. Ah, he deflates. What about the acoustics? A properly struck spoon rings quite pleasantly. Perhaps you could disorient him with unexpected chiming. You're about to dismiss this as brandy fueled nonsense when you remember reading about Byzantine warriors who used bells and cymbals to frighten enemy horses. Historians still argue whether this was tactical genius or desperate improvisation. Either way, those warriors probably weren't facing a single irritated aristocrat in a London park. By midnight, you've developed a repertoire of moves: the soup swirl, a circular parrying motion, the dessert dash, a quick thrust toward the opponent's eyes, and the table setting, a defensive stance that makes you look like you're about to serve invisible tea. Thomas documents each technique in increasingly illegible handwriting, occasionally adding helpful notes like, "Try not to die and remember to breathe." Your practice session attracts Mrs. Pembroke's attention. She watches from the doorway, her expression cycling between concern and amusement. "Mr. Henderson," she finally says, "I've seen many things in my 60 years, but a gentleman preparing for mortal combat with my second best spoon is certainly novel." "Your second best?" You pause mid-soup swirl. "Well, I'm not lending you the good silver for such foolishness. That's for proper occasions." You wonder if impending death counts as a proper occasion, but decide not to ask. Mrs. Pembroke studies your stance with the critical eye of someone who's spent decades perfecting table service. "You're holding it wrong," she declares. "Spoon combat requires finesse, not brute force." Before you can point out that spoon combat doesn't require anything because it doesn't exist, she's adjusting your grip, straightening your posture, and demonstrating what she calls proper cutlery deportment. Her movements are surprisingly fluid, and you realize that decades of navigating crowded dining rooms with full soup tureens have given her a grace most fencing masters would envy. "The secret," she says, executing a perfect thrust that would have delivered soup directly into an imaginary duke's bowl from 3 feet away, "is to make your opponent question everything they thought they knew about combat. If you can't kill them, confound them." Thomas arrives before dawn with a leather case that definitely doesn't contain dueling pistols. Inside, nestled in velvet, like the world's most confused treasure, lies your chosen spoon. He's spent the night researching dueling protocols, and his bloodshot eyes suggest he's discovered either enlightenment or madness. "Right," he says, consulting a crumpled paper. "According to the Code Duello, we need to establish terms, distance, number of exchanges, and what constitutes satisfaction." You're still trying to wrap your mind around spoon exchanges when your coach arrives. The driver takes one look at your weapon case and asks if you're attending a very aggressive breakfast party. The ride to Hampstead Heath passes in tense silence, broken only by Thomas muttering about precedents and your stomach making sounds like a dying walrus. The Dueling Code, established in 1777 by Irish gentlemen who apparently had nothing better to do, contains 36 rules governing everything from the proper way to deliver an insult to acceptable reasons for shooting someone before breakfast. Rule number 15 states that challenges must be delivered in writing if verbal negotiation fails. Rule 23 covers the fascinating topic of when it's appropriate to fire into the air, almost never, nowhere. Thomas confirms after his fourth review. Does it mention spoons? You arrive to find Pemberton already waiting with his second and a small crowd of spectators. Word has spread about the unusual weapon choice, and several gentlemen have risen unusually early to witness what one will later describe in his diary as either the dawn of a new age in dueling or the death of common sense. Pemberton's second, Ashworth, approaches with the gravity of someone negotiating a treaty. Gentlemen, we must establish the terms. Lord Pemberton suggests 5 paces, given the limited reach of the weapons. 20 paces, Thomas counters immediately. Standard dueling distance. Sir, at 20 paces, they'll be waving spoons at each other like deranged semaphore operators. There's a heated discussion about whether spoon combat requires modified distancing. Someone suggests consulting a chef. Another proposes measuring in soup courses rather than paces. The debate grows so absurd that even the surgeon, who's seen men shoot each other over card games, looks bemused. Eventually, you settle on 10 paces, close enough for spoons to theoretically connect, far enough to maintain some dignity. The number of exchanges proves trickier. Traditional sword duels continue until first blood or satisfaction. But what constitutes first blood with a spoon? A particularly vigorous tap? Successful delivery of invisible porridge? Perhaps, suggests a scholarly-looking spectator, satisfaction could be achieved when one party successfully disarms the other's spoon. Or, Pemberton interjects coldly, when one party admits the foolishness of this entire endeavor. You consider pointing out that he could have refused your weapon choice. But Thomas grips your shoulder in warning. The negotiations continue as the sun creeps higher, painting Hampstead Heath in shades of gold and absurdity. Historians still argue whether dueling culture represented civilization's pinnacle or its lowest point. The practice of settling disputes through regulated violence dates back centuries, with each culture adding its own flourishes. The French preferred elaborate sword work. The Americans favored pistols at dawn. The Germans developed something called academic fencing, where students would deliberately scar each other's faces to look distinguished. And now you're adding confused British spoon-waving to this noble tradition. A latecomer arrives breathlessly, explaining he's from the London Gazette. Heard about the spoon duel, he gasps. Mind if I take notes? This could be historical. Or hysterical, someone mutters. The formalities drag on. There's debate about whether seconds should also carry spoons. They shouldn't. Whether the weapons should be inspected for sharpness, they're spoons, and whether conventional dueling attire applies. It does. Unfortunately, your formal coat restricts your soup swirl considerably. During a particularly heated exchange about what constitutes spoon honor, you notice Pemberton practicing his own moves. He's developed what looks like a fencing stance adapted for cutlery, his spoon held like a miniature rapier. His form is actually quite good, which is somehow more insulting than if he'd treated this as a joke. Final terms, Ashworth announces. 10 paces, unlimited exchanges until one party yields or achieves satisfaction. The weapons shall be standard dining spoons, no modifications permitted. Seconds shall not intervene unless rules are breached. The surgeon shall stand ready for any injuries, however unlikely. The surgeon mutters something about preferring gunshot wounds to whatever spoon related injuries he might encounter. You sign the agreement with a hand that's surprisingly steady, considering you're essentially authorizing your own death by dinnerware. The sun climbs higher as you contemplate your spoon with the intensity of a philosopher discovering a new theorem. You've had exactly 7 hours to develop a fighting style for a utensil designed to transport soup from bowl to mouth, not glory from earth to heaven. Thomas helps you out of your coat. Apparently, one must face death in shirt sleeves, while you mentally review your hastily invented techniques. The soup swirl, you decide, will be your primary defense. The circular motion could, theoretically, deflect an incoming spoon or at least confuse your opponent into questioning his life choices. The dessert dash requires speed and precision, aiming for vulnerable points like the eyes or throat, though you're not sure a spoon can actually damage either unless Pemberton obligingly holds still while you poke him repeatedly. Remember, Thomas whispers, confusion is your ally. No one here, including you, knows what proper spoon combat looks like. And you nod, trying to channel the energy of those possibly fictional Mongolian ladle warriors. Your grip adjusts minutely, finding the balance point Mrs. Pembroke showed you. The spoon's weight, negligible at dinner, now feels significant. This chunk of silver must somehow preserve your honor and your internal organs. A peculiar philosophy begins forming in your mind. Traditional weapons impose their own logic. Swords slash, pistols shoot, fists punch. But a spoon exists in liminal space, between tool and weapon, between civilization and absurdity. Perhaps that's your advantage. While Pemberton approaches this as modified swordplay, you're inventing something entirely new, combat cutlery theory. You practice a few experimental movements, blending Mrs. Pembroke's serving grace with half-remembered theater fights you've witnessed. The key, you realize, isn't to fight with a spoon as if it were a sword, but to embrace its spoonness. Let Pemberton thrust and parry. You'll ladle and serve your way to victory, or at least to memorable defeat. Gentlemen, the referee, a retired colonel who's overseen dozens of conventional duels, calls out, "Please take your positions." You walk to your mark, spoon held in what you've decided to call ready serving position. Across the field, Pemberton mirrors your stance with disturbing competence. His spoon catches the morning light like a tiny silver flag of war. The crowd falls silent. Someone coughs. A bird, clearly unimpressed by human drama, chirps irritably from a nearby tree. You focus on your breathing, trying to remember Mrs. Pembroke's advice about confounding expectations. Your free hand rests at your hip, not in a fist, but relaxed, as if you're about to escort someone to their table at an extremely violent restaurant. You may still withdraw, Pemberton calls out, his voice carrying that particular aristocratic tone that makes everything sound like both an observation and a threat. Admit your insult and apologize. I maintain, you respond, surprised by your own steadiness, that your wig resembles unwell wildlife, though I'm willing to upgrade it to a moderately healthy badger if that helps. Someone in the crowd snickers. Pemberton's face darkens. The referee looks like he's reconsidering his life choices. The philosophical implications of your stance grow clearer. Throughout history, dueling has represented the intersection of violence and civilization, barbarity dressed in elaborate rules, but you've pushed it further into the realm of the surreal. If men can murder each other politely over perceived slights, why not with spoons? Your weapon choice forces everyone to confront the absurdity inherent in the practice. Fringe historians claim there's precedent for unconventional dueling weapons. In 1632, two French nobles allegedly fought with loaves of stale bread. In 1808, a dispute in Bavaria was supposedly settled via competitive sausage throwing. Most scholars dismiss these accounts as satire that later generations mistook for fact. But standing here, spoon at the ready, you wonder if those stories started exactly like this, with someone too panicked or clever to choose sensibly. The combat shall commence on my signal, the referee announces, producing a white handkerchief with the solemnity of someone unveiling a holy relic. You shall advance and engage until satisfaction is achieved. May God have mercy on. Well, may God have mercy. Your knees bend slightly, weight shifting to the balls of your feet. The cutlery guard feels almost natural now, as if humans were always meant to face death while holding soup delivery devices. You visualize your strategy, open with the soup swirl to test his defenses, transition to the table setting if he presses forward, save the dessert dash for a decisive moment. Pemberton adjusts his grip, and you notice he's holding his spoon more like a fencing foil than you expected. His form suggests actual thought has gone into this. The disturbing possibility occurs to you that he might have spent the night practicing too, possibly with professional instruction. What if London contains secret spoon-fighting masters, waiting for exactly this moment to reveal their ancient art? The handkerchief flutters in the morning breeze like a moth having an existential crisis. Time slows. You become hyper-aware of everything, the dew evaporating from the grass, the whispered bets being placed among spectators, the way Pemberton's spoon trembles almost imperceptibly. Your own breathing sounds unnaturally loud, as if you're trying to inhale confidence and exhale the crushing realization that you're about to duel with kitchenware. Before we begin, you announce, your voice carrying across the field, I should mention that I trained extensively last night with the legendary Madame Pembroke, mistress of the Transylvanian Spoon Fighting Academy. The referee pauses, handkerchief half raised. The what? Oh yes, you continue, warming to your fiction. She learned from her grandmother, who served the Habsburgs, Apparently, the Austrian court settled all disputes below the rank of duke with an ornamental cutlery, much more civilized than all this sword business. And Pemberton's eyes narrow. There is no Transylvanian spoon fighting academy. Prove it. You counter. This sparks a heated sidebar among the spectators. The journalist scribbles frantically. Someone mentions their uncle once saw something similar in Prague. Another swears his grandfather told stories about Croatian ladle duels. Within minutes, half the crowd is debating the theoretical history of European cutlery combat, while you stand there, trying not to smile. Enough, the referee barks. Real or imagined, your training begins now. Gentlemen, on my signal. The handkerchief drops. Neither of you moves immediately. There's a particular etiquette to approaching armed combat, even when the arms in question typically transport peas. Pemberton takes one measured step forward. You respond with a slight advance, raising your spoon to middle guard. The 10 paces between you might as well be an ocean. Any time now, someone in the crowd mutters. You decide psychological warfare needs escalation. With your free hand, you reach into your pocket and produce another spoon, a teaspoon, to be precise, which you hold like a main gauche. The crowd gasps. Pemberton stops mid-step. 2 spoons? Ashworth protests. That wasn't agreed upon. The terms specified spoons. Thomas counters smoothly. Plural, no number limit was established. While they argue, you begin an elaborate display of dual spoon coordination. The tablespoon weaves figure eights, while the teaspoon performs what you hope looks like deadly precision work, but probably resembles someone conducting an invisible miniature orchestra. The key to psychological warfare, you realize, is to make your opponent question not just your sanity, but their own for engaging with you. Pemberton's jaw clenches. He advances 3 quick steps, spoon extended in a classic fencing thrust. You parry with your tablespoon. The silver rings out with a surprisingly musical note, while bringing the teaspoon up in what would be a devastating riposte if teaspoons could devastate anything larger than a sugar cube. Ha! You exclaim, dancing backward. The Viennese sugar defense. Madame Pembroke said you might try that. There is no Viennese sugar defense. Pemberton lunges again, his form actually quite good, despite the handicap of wielding breakfast equipment. You execute the soup swirl, your tablespoon creating a silver blur that accomplishes nothing but looks impressive. The teaspoon darts in and out like a confused hummingbird. Pemberton tries to bind your spoon, a classical fencing move that works significantly worse when both weapons have bowls instead of blades. The psychological impact of your bizarre behavior is working. Pemberton's movements become increasingly aggressive, but less coordinated. He's trying to force this into a conventional duel while you're turning it into performance art. When he attempts a classical beat attack, you respond by drumming both spoons against each other in a rhythm that sounds almost like applause. Will you want this seriously? He demands, sweat beading on his forehead. I've never been more serious, you reply, executing a move you spontaneously christen the pudding parry. This is exactly as serious as 2 grown men fighting with spoons deserves to be. Someone in the crowd laughs, then another, The journalist is sketching rapid cartoons in his notebook. Even the surgeon looks entertained, though he maintains professional readiness for whatever spoon related injuries might still occur. Historians still argue whether mockery constitutes a valid dueling strategy. The Code Duello emphasizes dignity and honor, but you're discovering that dignity becomes negotiable when everyone involved is waving cutlery. Your approach, embracing the absurdity rather than fighting it, transforms the duel from potential tragedy to certain farce. Pemberton redoubles his efforts, attempting what would be a magnificent balestra attack if he weren't holding a spoon. You retreat, keeping both utensils in constant, meaningless motion. The teaspoon accidentally flies from your grip, spinning through the air in a glittering arc before landing in the grass. Ah, you announce, the flying teaspoon gambit, classic misdirection. The loss of your teaspoon should put you at a disadvantage, but you've discovered something profound about human nature. People struggle to take seriously what they can't understand, and nobody here understands what's happening anymore. You shift to single spoon combat with exaggerated gravity, as if losing your secondary utensil was part of some ancient strategy passed down through generations of cutlery warriors. Speaking of historical dueling disasters, you say conversationally, parrying another of Pemberton's increasingly frantic thrusts. Did you know that in 1613, the Earl of Shrewsbury died in a duel because his opponent's sword got stuck in his doublet's decorative frogging? Took them 20 minutes to untangle him. He bled out while they debated proper extraction etiquette. Pemberton pauses mid-lunge. What? Oh, yes. And then there was the infamous balloon duel of 1808. Two Frenchmen decided pistols at dawn were too mundane, so they fought from hot air balloons above Paris. De Grandpré shot down Peake's balloon. Poor Peake crashed into a rooftop. The real tragedy: he was winning until gravity intervened. You punctuate this history lesson with a series of defensive moves that would make sense if spoons were designed for combat. They aren't. So instead, you look like you're aggressively serving invisible soup to an invisible duke who keeps moving his invisible bowl. The crowd has grown. Word spreads quickly in London when gentlemen do something memorably stupid. You spot several ladies who've allegedly risen early for morning constitutionals, but whose timing seems suspiciously convenient. One holds opera glasses, though at this distance she could count your nostril hairs without optical assistance. In 1826, you continue, dodging a particularly vicious spooning, two Italian gentlemen fought with billiard cues in Venice. Halfway through, they realized they were in the wrong building. They'd broken into someone's gaming room instead of the agreed-upon courtyard. The owner made them pay for the damaged felt before they could continue trying to kill each other. Will you stop talking? Pemberton's face has achieved a shade of red typically reserved for boiled lobsters. Historical context relaxes me. Did you know the longest duel on record lasted 19 hours? Two French cavalry officers, 1794. They started with swords, moved to pistols when those broke, and ended up wrestling in a pond. They called it a draw when they both nearly drowned. Your encyclopedic recitation of dueling disasters serves multiple purposes. First, It's deeply annoying, which throws off Pemberton's concentration. Second, it reminds everyone present that dueling history is filled with absurdity. You're just adding another chapter. Third, it's easier to avoid thinking about your own mortality when you're focused on other people's ridiculous deaths. Pemberton attempts what fencers call a flesh, an explosive running attack. With a sword, it's intimidating. With a spoon, he looks like an extremely aggressive waiter pursuing a customer who forgot to tip. You sidestep, extending your spoon in what you decide to call the gravy boat guard, and Pemberton's momentum carries him past. The real question, you muse as he wheels around, is whether we're making history or mockery. Both, someone in the crowd shouts. Definitely both. The journalist approaches the referee. Sir, I need a quote. How does one score points in spoon combat? The referee, a man who's overseen duels where actual blood was spilled, looks lost. Points aren't. This isn't a game. Isn't it, you ask, deflecting another attack with a move that could generously be called interpretive dance. Two grown men playing with spoons at dawn. If this isn't a game, what is it? This philosophical bomb detonates in the crowd. Arguments break out about the nature of honor, the purpose of dueling, and whether cutlery combat represents evolution or devolution. Meanwhile, you and Pemberton continue your violent breakfast theater, neither able to actually harm the other, but both too committed to stop. In Bavaria, you pant, beginning to feel the unexpected cardiovascular demands of spoon fighting. They used to duel with sausages, actual sausages. The winner was whoever made their opponent too sick to continue. That's not true, Pemberton objects, though his conviction wavers. Historians still argue about it, just like they'll argue about this. Imagine the footnotes. While Thompson maintains the spoon duel of 1794 was satirical performance art, Jenkins argues it represented a genuine evolution in combat philosophy. Fringe historian Dr. Cornelius Fitzgerald actually did publish a paper in 1823 titled Unusual Armaments in Affairs of Honor, which cataloged 17 alleged duels featuring non-traditional weapons. Most mainstream scholars dismissed it as fantasy, but standing here, spoon aching in your grip, you wonder if Dr. Sven Fitzgerald was simply ahead of his time. Thomas and Ashworth have been huddled in conference for the past 10 minutes while you and Pemberton circle each other like wary roosters. The negotiation of seconds resembles a parliamentary debate crossed with a circus act. They're trying to determine if first blood is even possible with spoons, whether satisfaction can be achieved without injury, and what happens if this continues until everyone gets hungry for breakfast. Gentlemen, Ashworth calls out, we propose a brief cessation to clarify terms. Now, Pemberton objects, not lowering his spoon. We're in the middle of combat. Are we, though? You ask. Combat implies the possibility of victory. This is more like aggressive place setting. The referee agrees to a pause, though he looks like he's questioning every decision that led him to officiating a spoon fight. You and Pemberton retreat to your respective corners, a boxing term that seems oddly appropriate for this culinary contest. Thomas wipes sweat from his brow, despite the cool morning air. Right. I've been thinking, What if we propose alternative satisfaction? Perhaps Lord Pemberton would accept a creative insult about his wig. You seem to have a gift for those. My honor demands physical satisfaction, Pemberton shouts from his corner, where Ashworth is actually polishing his spoon with a handkerchief. Your honor demands you fight with cutlery, you call back. Perhaps we should recalibrate our definitions. This sparks another philosophical debate among the spectators. A professor from Oxford, identifiable by his tendency to quote Latin at inappropriate moments, suggests this represents a paradigm shift in conflict resolution. A military man counters that combat is combat, regardless of implements. The ladies with opera glasses are taking bets on who'll collapse from exhaustion first. The negotiations grow increasingly surreal. Someone suggests importing rules from competitive soup eating. Another proposes judging based on artistic merit. The journalist documents every word, occasionally chuckling at particularly absurd suggestions. What if, Ashworth proposes desperately, satisfaction is achieved when one combatant successfully feeds the other? The silence that follows is profound. Even the birds stop chirping, possibly out of respect for the death of logic. Feed? Pemberton's voice cracks. Like a baby? It would demonstrate dominance, Ashworth argues weakly, forcing your opponent to accept sustenance from your spoon. That's somehow worse than death, you observe. Thomas, ever helpful, produces a small jar from his coat. I brought marmalade, in case you needed provisions. We could use that? The referee throws his hands up. In 30 years of overseeing affairs of honor, I've never... Marmalade? Are we truly discussing combat jam? Preserves, Thomas corrects. Marmalade is preserves, not jam. The distinction matters. Does it? The referee asks, his voice suggesting a man watching his sanity pack its bags. Does anything matter anymore? You're about to suggest that nothing has mattered since you chose spoons when Pemberton makes a strangled sound. He's standing rigid, spoon trembling, face cycled through red to purple and now approaching an alarming white. I can't, he gasps. We're grown men, educated men. I have a seat in Parliament. I've dined with the Prince Regent, and I'm standing in a field at dawn, holding a spoon, while people discuss feeding me marmalade for honor. Self-awareness, you exclaim, the deadliest weapon of all. Pemberton's grip on his spoon loosens. The weapon, if it can be called that, droops like a metallic flower wilting in the morning sun. Around you, the crowd holds its breath. Is this the end? Can existential crisis constitute satisfaction? My second, Pemberton continues, his voice hollow, is polishing my spoon, polishing it, as if the reflectiveness of my cutlery determines my worth as a gentleman. To be fair, you offer, it's a very shiny spoon. He looks at you then, really looks, and you see the exact moment his worldview shifts. It's like watching someone realize they're in a dream or a nightmare staged by a particularly whimsical deity. Your wig does look like a diseased badger, he admits. Thank you, but I spent 40 pounds on it. That makes it worse, really. You paid to look like you're wearing deceased wildlife. Historians still argue whether mutual enlightenment can end a duel. The Code Duello makes no provision for both parties simultaneously recognizing the absurdity of their situation. But then again, the Code Duello never anticipated spoons. Thomas steps forward with the marmalade jar, hope blooming on his face. So, breakfast? The morning sun climbs higher, transforming dewdrops into tiny prisms while you contemplate the traditional pre-duel letter you were supposed to write. Most duelists pen heartfelt farewells to loved ones, settle debts, or share profound final thoughts. You, however, spent last night drafting something rather different with your trusty spoon beside you as inspiration. Before we continue, you announce, producing a sealed envelope from your waistcoat, I've prepared my final testament. Should this spoon prove my downfall, please deliver this to the Times. The referee, grasping at any semblance of protocol, nods solemnly. Of course, your final words shall be preserved. Oh, it's not words, it's recipes. 17 different ways to serve soup, with detailed spoon techniques for each. I call it Meditations on Mortality and Minestrone. Thomas groans. You spent your potentially last night on Earth writing soup recipes? Chapter 3 covers the philosophical implications of French onion versus tomato bisque. I'm particularly proud of the footnotes on proper spoon angles for different broth consistencies. Pemberton stares at you with the expression of a man who's traveled beyond anger into a strange new emotional territory. You wrote a cookbook as your death letter? More of a manifesto, really. The spoon as metaphor, reflections on curvature and conflict. The appendix includes detailed drawings of optimal grips for both dining and dueling. You pull out a second envelope. This one's for my mother. It explains how to achieve the perfect tea-stirring vortex. She always stirs counterclockwise, which I maintain disrupts the natural flow of the universe. The crowd doesn't know whether to laugh or maintain respectful silence. The journalist has given up on categorizing this event and simply writes everything down, presumably letting future editors sort out what's real. I also prepared one for my creditors. You continue, producing a third envelope. It's a promissory note payable in soup. I've calculated that my debts equal approximately 3,847 bowls of quality consommé. My estate should honor this at a rate of 2 bowls daily. That's over 5 years of soup. Thomas calculates, because apparently arithmetic still functions in this reality. 6 years, accounting for holidays and Sundays when the kitchen's closed. I've included a detailed delivery schedule and acceptable substitutions for seasonal availability. Pre-duel letters traditionally serve to cement one's legacy, ensuring your version of events survives. Yours ensures future generations will question whether the entire affair was elaborate performance art. You've included sketches of your invented techniques, philosophical musings on the nature of cutlery, and a surprisingly moving passage about how spoons unite humanity. We all eat soup, regardless of station. This one, you wave a fourth envelope, is for Lord Pemberton's wig maker. It contains suggestions for more lifelike designs. I've included samples of actual badger fur for comparison, ethically sourced. Of course, the badger died of natural causes. You prepared a letter for my wig maker? Pemberton's voice has transcended outrage and achieved a sort of mystified awe. It seemed rude to criticize without offering constructive alternatives. Page 3 has a delightful sketch of a wig styled like a healthy woodland creature, perhaps a noble fox or ambitious squirrel. The referee clutches your letters like a man holding evidence of society's collapse. Are any of these actual farewells? Oh yes, this one. You produce a final, smaller envelope. It's for my landlady's cat, Mr. Whiskers. He's been eyeing my good boots, and I wanted him to know he can have them if I don't return. The left one has a secret compartment with treats. Even Ashworth, who's maintained admirable composure throughout this ordeal, looks defeated. He wrote to a cat. Mr. Whiskers is very literate for a feline. He once knocked over my inkwell in what I'm certain was an attempt at correspondence. Your unconventional letters serve a deeper purpose than mere eccentricity. By refusing to treat this as a genuine life or death situation, you've reframed the entire narrative. Future accounts won't focus on honor defended or offense avenged, but on the man who faced death while finalizing soup recipes. I suppose, Pemberton says slowly, you didn't write any actual farewells? No heartfelt goodbyes to family or friends? You consider this. Would you believe I included a genuine emotional passage in the soup manifesto? Page 12, between the Gazpacho Guidelines and Mulligatawny Musings. It explains how sharing soup represents humanity's greatest achievement, the transformation of necessity into community. That's actually rather beautiful, someone in the crowd murmurs. Also, the mulligatawny recipe is exceptional. I recommend a counterclockwise stir pattern, despite my mother's preferences. The sun has risen fully now, bathing Hampstead Heath in golden light that makes the entire scene look like a painting titled The Decline of Rational Thought. You adjust your grip on the spoon. Your palm has grown sweaty, making the silver slippery, and prepare for what you've decided to call the breakfast gambit. You stride toward the dueling ground with exaggerated purpose, each step calculated to maximize drama while minimizing actual threat. Behind you, Thomas follows with the jar of marmalade held like a sacred relic. The crowd parts, unsure whether they're witnessing history or having a collective hallucination. Lord Pemberton, you declare, raising your spoon high enough to catch the light. I arrive at this field not as your enemy, but as a fellow victim of circumstance. We are both prisoners of pride, wielding weapons that mock our very existence. Pemberton, who had been practicing what looked like spoon thrusts against an imaginary opponent, freezes mid-jab. What are you doing now? Making an entrance. If we must duel with spoons, let us at least do so with theatrical flair. You execute a completely unnecessary spin, your coattails flaring dramatically. Behold, I am the spoon warrior of Southwark, trained in the ancient art of cutlery combat by mystics who speak only in soup metaphors. There are no mystics, Pemberton protests weakly. Prove it, you counter, launching into a series of moves that blend interpretive dance with what medieval manuscripts might call the fever dreams of a malnourished monk. Your spoon traces patterns in the air that spell nothing but suggest everything, The crowd's reaction is mixed. Some applaud, others look concerned for your mental health. The journalist sketches frantically, trying to capture movements that defy both physics and common sense. One elderly gentleman declares this better than last season's opera, though that might be damning with faint praise. You approach the center ground walking backward, narrating your own movements like a deranged master of ceremonies. Watch as I employ the reverse breakfast advance, a technique banned in 3 countries for causing excessive confusion. It's not banned because it doesn't exist. Pemberton's frustration has reached new heights. Everything exists once we name it. You philosophize, now hopping on one foot while maintaining spoon readiness. Before today, spoon dueling didn't exist. Now look at us, pioneers of a new form of combat. Generations will study our techniques. Thomas, ever supportive, begins a slow clap. Others join in, creating a rhythm that you immediately incorporate into your movement. You're essentially dancing now, a one-man ballet titled Ode to Unnecessary Conflict. Enough! Pemberton charges forward, spoon extended in what would be a magnificent attack if dignity hadn't abandoned this field an hour ago. You meet his charge with something you spontaneously call the marmalade matrix, a defensive position that involves holding your spoon at such an odd angle that Pemberton has to stop and reassess the basic principles of geometry. Is that even a real stance? He demands. It is now. History is written by the survivors, and if we both survive this, we can claim anything was real. You shift into another impossible position. This one's called the inverted breakfast prayer. Note how the spoon points toward yesterday. The philosophical implications of your entrance have transformed the duel from potential violence into certain performance. By refusing to take it seriously while taking your refusal very seriously, you've created a paradox that makes everyone's brain hurt. I trained all night, Pemberton admits, his voice carrying a note of despair. I actually practiced spoon techniques. My fencing master helped. We developed strategies. And I respect that. And you assure him, dodging his next thrust by essentially limboing beneath it. Your dedication to spoon violence is admirable, but consider, what if instead of fighting with spoons, we fought the very concept of fighting with spoons? That makes no sense. Exactly. The referee attempts to restore order. Gentlemen, please, some decorum. Decorum? You gesture wildly with your spoon, nearly taking out Thomas, who ducks with practiced ease. We're dueling with cutlery. Decorum died when I said spoons, and everyone agreed to it. We're in a post-decorum society now. A professor in the crowd nods thoughtfully and makes a note, probably planning a paper on post-decorum masculinity in late Georgian England. The ladies with opera glasses are now taking odds on whether this ends in violence, breakfast, or existential philosophy. Furthermore, you continue, because momentum is everything. I propose that arriving at a duel is itself a victory. We've both shown up. We've conquered fear, common sense, and the very reasonable voice that said, maybe don't fight with spoons. The standoff intensifies as you and Pemberton circle each other at the prescribed 10 paces. Your spoon gleams in the morning light, held in what you've decided to call the Continental Breakfast Guard, a position that would make sense if anyone had ever codified spoon combat. Pemberton mirrors your stance with disturbing precision, his own utensil poised for either violence or vigorous stirring. Observe, you announce to the crowd, the classic opening position of Viennese spoon dueling. Note the angle of my wrist, precisely 47 degrees from vertical, allowing for maximum confusion and minimum efficacy. There is no Viennese spoon dueling, Pemberton explodes, but his own wrist unconsciously adjusts to match your angle. There is now, you counter. We're making history. Pemberton, embrace it. Your grandchildren will ask where you were when spoon combat was invented, and you'll say, I was there, holding the spoon. The crowd has grown to nearly 50 people. Word travels fast in London when aristocrats do something memorably stupid. You spot a street artist setting up an easel, presumably to capture this moment for posterity, or at least for sale to newspapers. You shift your weight, raising your spoon higher. This position is called questioning the soup. See how the bowl faces heaven, as if asking the Almighty why we're doing this? Pemberton, despite himself, seems intrigued. And this? He adjusts his own stance, spoon angled downward. Ah, dismissing the pudding, a defensive posture suggesting dessert-based disappointment. Excellent form. What happens next will be debated by historians, philosophers, and confused cutlery enthusiasts for generations. Some say it was intentional. Others claim the morning dew made the grass slippery, but everyone agrees on the basic facts. Pemberton steps forward. You respond with an elaborate parry, and somehow, through physics that Newton would disown, both your spoons become entangled. Not locked in combat, not crossed in classic fencing style, actually tangled, bowls hooked together like silver puzzle pieces, forcing you and Pemberton into an awkward proximity that resembles either mortal combat or an extremely specific dance. What? Pemberton breathes, his face inches from yours. Is happening? I believe, you respond, trying to untangle your utensil without losing face. We've achieved spoon lock. It's the highest form of cutlery combat. That's not a thing. It is now. You both pull, but the spoons remain stubbornly interlinked. The curve of the bowls has created a geometric impossibility that would fascinate mathematicians if they weren't too dignified to study tangled tableware. The referee approaches cautiously. Gentlemen, perhaps if you rotate. No! You and Pemberton shout simultaneously. Neither of you knows why, but admitting you need help untangling spoons seems worse than death. The crowd presses closer. Someone suggests oil. Another recommends prayer. The journalist's sketch now resembles two men attempting to invent a new form of interpretive dance based on breakfast implements. Clockwise, you mutter. Counterclockwise, Pemberton insists. On 3, on 2, compromise, on 2.5. This negotiation continues while you're locked in the world's most specific embrace. Your free hands wave uselessly, trying to maintain balance while your spoon hands perform microscopic adjustments that achieve nothing. This is your fault, Pemberton hisses. You're the one who accepted spoons. You're the one who chose them. You're the one whose wig looks like taxidermy. During your struggle, someone in the crowd starts laughing, then another. Soon, the entire assembly is in hysterics, including the normally stoic surgeon who's realized his services definitely won't be needed unless someone dies of embarrassment. Historically, you pant, still trying to extract your spoon. Duels have ended in stranger ways. In 1652, two Dutchmen got their swords so tangled in each other's cloaks they had to be cut free by their seconds. We don't have swords, Pemberton points out. No, we have something worse. We have spoons that have achieved what appears to be an unbreakable covenant. The philosophical implications are staggering. You came here to fight and instead created a physical metaphor for mutually assured destruction. Neither can attack without the other's cooperation. Neither can retreat without admitting defeat. You're locked in the world's most embarrassing stalemate. Perhaps, the referee suggests delicately, this constitutes a draw? How can it be a draw? Ashworth protests. They haven't even properly fought. Haven't we, you ask, sweat dripping down your face from the effort of standing in one position while wrestling with tangled cutlery. We've transcended physical combat and achieved spiritual spoon union. This is either the highest form of dueling or the lowest, possibly both. The first exchange of actual combat, if it can be called that, begins when you and Pemberton finally disentangle your spoons through a process involving geometry, profanity, and what one spectator later describes as interpretive unwinding. Free at last, you both leap back to fighting distance, spoons raised, dignity scattered across Hampstead Heath like autumn leaves. On guard, Pemberton shouts, because apparently we're doing this properly now. Unspoon, you counter, because apparently you're still you. He lunges forward with surprising speed, the bowl of his spoon whistling through the air where your head was as moments before. You dodge left, bringing your own utensil up in what would be a perfect parry if either of you knew what you were doing. The metallic clash rings out across the field, a sound that will haunt cutlery drawers across London for generations. Ha! You exclaim, executing the soup swirl you practiced so diligently. Your spoon creates a silver circle in the air, accomplishing nothing but looking surprisingly elegant. The student becomes the teacher. We're both students. Pemberton attacks again, a series of quick thrusts that force you backward, and the subject is insanity. You deflect his attacks with moves that blend every half-remembered sword fight you've ever seen with the muscle memory of 1,000 formal dinners. Your footwork, trained by years of navigating crowded ballrooms, serves you surprisingly well. Who knew the skills for avoiding dance partners would translate to avoiding spoon violence? The exchange continues, thrust, parry, riposte, confusion. Pemberton's actually quite good. His form, speaking of genuine fencing training, adapted to breakfast warfare. You're more chaotic, mixing legitimate defensive moves with whatever occurs to you in the moment. When he attempts a classical bind, you respond by essentially stirring the air between you. Take this. Jam. Pemberton executes what fencers call a balestra, a jump lunge combination that would be intimidating if he weren't holding a spoon. You barely dodge, feeling the breeze as silver passes your ear. Nearly, you gasp, countering with something you decide to call the Breakfast Revenge, a wild series of cuts that have no basis in any martial tradition but keep Pemberton at bay through sheer unpredictability. Your form is excellent. Have you considered competitive soup service? The crowd reacts to each exchange like spectators at a gladiatorial match. If gladiators fought with tiny shields that could hold pudding. Get him, someone shouts, though it's unclear who they're supporting. Use the bowl end, another suggests, which is concerning since that's the only end available. You circle right. Pemberton mirrors left. Your spoons meet again in what would be a bind if spoons could properly bind. Instead, they sort of nudge each other like shy silver lovers. You push, he pushes back. It's less combat than aggressive place setting. Your stance is weakening, Pemberton declares. Your wig is tilting, you respond, which is both irrelevant and true. The exertion has caused his hairpiece to list dramatically to starboard. This observation breaks his concentration. You seize the moment, launching into the dessert dash you practiced with Thomas. Your spoon extends toward his face in what would be a devastating thrust if spoons were designed to devastate. Instead, it sort of boops his nose. Did you just boop me? Technically, I scored a touch. In formal spoon dueling, that's worth 3 points. There is no formal. He stops himself, possibly realizing that arguing about the rules of non-existent sports while actively participating in them represents a new level of absurdity. The exchange intensifies. Pemberton attempts what looks like a classical fleche attack. You respond with a move that can only be described as frantic scooping. Your spoons clash again and again, creating a percussion that attracts every bird within a mile radius. A crow lands nearby, clearly judging you both. Your attacks lack conviction. Pemberton pants, sweat streaming down his face. Your entire life lacks conviction. You shoot back. You're fighting with a spoon at dawn. We've all lost the conviction game. This philosophical truth bomb makes him pause just long enough for you to attempt your most ambitious move yet. A spinning attack you christen the centrifugal breakfast. You whirl like a well-dressed dervish, spoon extended, coattails flying. It accomplishes nothing tactically, but everything theatrically. Stop spinning! Stop making sense! The exchange reaches a crescendo when both of you, exhausted and oxygen deprived, simultaneously attempt the same move. Your spoons meet in midair with such force that the handles vibrate. The pure tone rings out across the heath, a perfect C sharp that makes everyone pause. Did we just, Pemberton gasps, achieve musical combat? The crowd's reaction to your musical spoon clash creates a peculiar energy that transforms the atmosphere entirely. What started as morbid curiosity has evolved into genuine entertainment. Someone produces a flask and passes it around. The ladies with opera glasses are now providing commentary to newcomers. Even the street artist has given up on accuracy and is painting something that looks more like divine revelation than dueling. "Bravo!" shouts a well-dressed woman who definitely didn't wake up expecting to watch spoon combat. "Encore!" "Madam," you call back, still maintaining your guard position. "We're trying to kill each other here." "No, you're not," she responds cheerfully. "You're inventing a new form of theater." This astute observation ripples through the crowd. People begin choosing sides not based on honor or justice, but on performance quality. Team Pemberton appreciates his technical precision. Team You enjoys your creative interpretation of physics. A small but vocal faction supports the spoons themselves, arguing they're the real heroes here. 5 pounds on the one with the tilting wig, someone wagers. 10 on the spinner, another counters. The referee attempts to restore order. This is a duel, not a carnival. What's the difference, you ask, deflecting another of Pemberton's attacks with a move that resembles someone trying to catch invisible butterflies. Both involve spectacle, risk, and questionable decision making. The crowd's energy feeds your performance. You begin playing to the audience, adding flourishes that serve no purpose beyond entertainment. When Pemberton lunges, you don't just dodge, you dodge with a bow to the ladies' section. When you attack, you announce it like a circus ringmaster. Behold, the ascending breakfast strike. Pemberton, despite himself, gets caught up in the theatrical atmosphere. His attacks become more elaborate, his footwork more dance-like. When he executes a particularly impressive sequence, the crowd applauds, and he actually pauses to acknowledge them with a slight nod. We're performing, he realizes with horror. We've been performing since we chose spoons. You point out, attempting something you decide to call the double helix dessert defense. We just have an audience now. A child breaks free from his governess and runs onto the field. Can I try? He asks, producing a wooden spoon from his pocket. Absolutely not, the governess cries, chasing after him. Let the boy fight, someone shouts, definitely drunk on either flask whiskey or the absurdity of the morning. He has a spoon, another adds, as if this qualifies anyone for combat. The referee looks ready to resign from refereeing entirely. Everyone, please, this is still a matter of honor. Honor? The child looks confused. But they're playing with spoons. And from the mouths of babes comes wisdom that makes every adult present reconsider their life choices. The boy is dragged away, but not before demonstrating a spoon technique that honestly looks more effective than anything you or Pemberton have managed. Did that child just show us up? Pemberton asks. I think he did. We're being outdone by someone who still has porridge on his face. This realization prompts a new exchange of attacks. Both of you determined to prove you're better at fake fighting than a 6-year-old. The intensity increases, but so does the absurdity. You're not trying to hurt each other anymore. You're competing for audience approval. Ladies and gentlemen, you announce between parries, Lord Pemberton will now attempt the feared Northumberland noodle nudge. That's not what it's called, Pemberton protests, but executes the move anyway, because the crowd seems to expect it. The journalist has given up on prose and is now writing what appears to be poetry. Two souls united in silver folly, their spoons aloft like metal holly. You hear him mutter. Are you writing verse about us? You call out. Someone has to immortalize this properly, he responds. Prose can't capture the magnificent stupidity. A vendor arrives, somehow having heard about the gathering. Soup for sale, he cries. Watch the spoon fight with appropriate refreshments. You can't sell soup at a duel, the referee objects. Why not? They're fighting with soup equipment. The vendor sets up shop at a safe distance. Soon, spectators are slurping breakfast while watching you and Pemberton attempt to murder each other with the same implements they're using to eat. The irony is lost on no one. This has become a festival, Pemberton observes, narrowly avoiding your latest attack. Better than a funeral, you reply, spinning again because the crowd seems to like it. Though I'm starting to wish I'd chosen something dignified, like pies or books, or literally anything else. Agreed. Next time someone insults my wig, I'm just going to say thank you. Next time, you planning to buy another badger? The crowd laughs. Even Pemberton's mouth twitches toward a smile before he remembers he's supposed to be defending his honor with cutlery. Your spoon work, through some bizarre alchemy of repetition and desperation, has begun to resemble actual technique. The random movements you've been making start to flow together in patterns that could generously be called martial arts if martial arts included implements designed for porridge consumption. Even more disturbing, Pemberton seems to be developing complementary counter techniques, as if you're accidentally inventing an entire combat system through pure stubbornness. Your form, Master Chen observes from the crowd, and when did a martial arts master arrive at your spoon duel, reminds me of Drunken Crane style, but with breakfast. Drunken Crane, you pant, executing another soup swirl. Ancient technique. Practitioner moves like intoxicated bird. Very effective. You move like intoxicated person who lost their bird and is trying to eat soup in earthquake. That's actually accurate. You admit, stumbling through a defensive sequence that does indeed resemble someone failing a sobriety test while clutching cutlery. Pemberton attempts what he's started calling the Westminster Whisk, a flurrying attack that would be terrifying if performed with literally any other weapon. Your response, born of pure instinct and possibly oxygen deprivation, involves dropping to one knee while extending your spoon skyward. Master Chen nods approvingly. Ah, kneeling servant offers dessert, classic defensive position. It is? You maintain the pose, partly because it sounds legitimate, and partly because your legs are too tired to stand immediately. No, Master Chen admits, but could be. You are inventing new school, spoon fu, cutlery kwando. This validation from an actual martial artist transforms the morning's absurdity into something approaching legitimacy. Your movements become more confident, blending the randomness with something that almost resembles purposeful technique. When Pemberton attacks high, you go low. When he thrusts, you circle. It's like dancing. If dancing involved trying to hit your partner with soup delivery devices. The way you hold spoon, Master Chen continues his commentary, creates natural defense arc. See, bowl deflects, handle maintains distance, is actually quite clever. I'm clever, you shout to Pemberton. Master Chen says I'm clever. Who is Master Chen? Pemberton demands, executing a complex series of attacks that force you to use moves you didn't know you knew. That gentleman there, he's validating our nonsense. The crowd has formed a proper circle now, giving you a defined combat space that makes everything feel more official and therefore more ridiculous. Someone started a betting pool not on who wins, but on which made-up technique name will stick. Breakfast revenge is currently favored over pudding Perry, though centrifugal breakfast has its supporters. You flow from defense to offense, your spoon tracing patterns that would make geometry teachers weep. The exhaustion has pushed you past conscious thought into a state where your body moves on pure instinct, instinct that apparently includes spoon combat. Pemberton matches you move for move, his own technique evolving from classical fencing towards something entirely new. You know, you gasp between exchanges. We might actually be good at this. Good at what? Pemberton counters, his spoonwork increasingly fluid. There's no this to be good at. There is now, Master Chen begins instructing the crowd. See how they use whole body, not just arm. Spoon becomes extension of self. Very philosophical, very stupid, but very philosophical. A young man in the crowd attempts to imitate your soup swirl with his walking stick. Others begin practicing their own interpretations with whatever's handy, parasols, pipes, one optimistic fellow with a shoe. Within minutes, half the audience is engaged in mock spoon combat, developing their own styles based on your accidental innovations. We're creating a movement, you realize with equal parts pride and horror. A bowel movement, maybe, Pemberton mutters, but his heart isn't in the insult. He's too focused on perfecting what he's decided to call the parliamentary pudding thrust. The accidental martial art you're creating draws from every influence imaginable. Your stance combines ballroom dancing with tavern brawling. Pemberton's incorporates his fencing training with what appears to be repressed childhood memories of food fights. Together, you're writing the first chapter of the world's most unnecessary combat manual. In future, Master Chen predicts, people will study this, will argue about meaning. What did spoon masters intend? They will ask. Was hidden wisdom or just two idiots with utensils? Both, you suggest, narrowly avoiding Pemberton's latest innovation, a low sweep that would take out your ankles if it connected. Always both, Master Chen agrees sagely. Best martial arts are accidental, like tea. No one meant to drink leaf water, but here we are. The philosophical implications of accidentally creating a martial art while trying to kill someone with a spoon are staggering. You've moved beyond simple combat into the realm of artistic expression, each movement a statement about the arbitrary nature of violence and the human tendency to find patterns in chaos. The duel has reached a critical juncture where honor and absurdity exist in perfect, unsustainable tension. You and Pemberton stand 3 paces apart, both breathing heavily, spoons raised in salute. Your shirt is soaked with sweat. His wig has achieved an angle that defies both gravity and good taste, and somewhere in the crowd, a philosopher is having an existential crisis. Gentlemen, the referee interjects, his voice carrying the weight of a man who'll never referee anything again. Surely honor has been satisfied. You've fought with vigor. Honor? You gasp. We passed honor 6 villages back. We're in uncharted territory now. We're explorers on the far shores of dignity. Pemberton lowers his spoon slightly. He's right. I don't even remember what we're fighting about anymore. Your wig, you remind him helpfully. Diseased badger, though honestly, After seeing it from multiple combat angles, I'm upgrading it to moderately healthy ferret. Progress. But someone in the crowd shouts. The morning sun has reached the angle where it transforms everything into a golden tableau. The artist, who's been painting furiously, steps back to reveal a canvas that looks less like a duel and more like a Renaissance masterpiece titled The Ascension of Nonsense, or possibly Breakfast Judas. Here's what I propose, you say, an idea forming through the fog of exhaustion. We've created something here, something stupid, yes, but something nonetheless. Master Chen says we've invented a martial art. The crowd's entertained. The journalist has enough material for a novel. Even your wig has achieved legendary status. Your point? Pemberton asks, though he's listening. We could continue until one of us collapses or accidentally achieves spoon-based murder, or you pause for dramatic effect, because theater is apparently your life now. We could acknowledge that we've transcended the original insult through collaborative absurdity. The crowd murmurs, this is not how duels traditionally end, but then again, nothing about this morning has been traditional. Thomas steps forward with the marmalade jar, hope renewed on his face. Think about it. You continue, warming to your theme. We started as enemies. Now we're co-founders of an accidental martial art. Our grandchildren won't ask, did grandfather win the duel? They'll ask, is grandfather really one of the legendary spoon masters of Hampstead Heath? Pemberton's grip on his spoon shifts subtly, not loosening in defeat, but adjusting in consideration. You're suggesting we end this as colleagues, co-conspirators in the great cutlery conspiracy of 1794, our names forever linked in the annals of unnecessary combat innovation. But my honor, your honor is fighting me with a spoon, you interrupt. At dawn, while sober, that takes more courage than 1,000 conventional duels. Besides, look at them. You gesture to the crowd, where people are still practicing spoon techniques. We've given London something to talk about besides taxes and weather. That's practically a public service. The vendor, who's sold out of soup and is now taking orders for tomorrow, calls out, I vote for reconciliation. Bad for business if my spoon suppliers kill each other. This practical perspective breaks through. Pemberton looks at his spoon, really looks at it, and something shifts in his expression. It's the face of a man realizing he's been taking breakfast cutlery very, very seriously for the past hour. Your wig does look like a badger, you offer, but honestly, in this light, it's quite majestic, like a badger who achieved its dreams. An aspirational badger? Exactly. A badger who refused to let society define its limits. Pemberton's mouth twitches. Then, in a moment that historians will argue about forever, he laughs. Not a polite chuckle or sardonic snort, but genuine, deep laughter that transforms his entire countenance. We're idiots, he declares. Magnificent idiots. You correct. There's a difference. Master Chen nods approvingly. Wise men know when to stop being stupid. Wiser men know when to be stupid with purpose. Wisest men know when stupidity becomes wisdom. That makes no sense, Pemberton says. Nothing this morning makes sense. You point out. Why start now? The referee looks between you both, hope dawning on his haggard face. Are you saying honor is satisfied? You and Pemberton exchange glances. In that moment, you're not duelist and defender, insulter and insulted. You're two men who've shared something profoundly ridiculous and lived to question it. I propose, Pemberton says slowly, that honor has been not just satisfied, but possibly oversatisfied. We may have actually generated surplus honor that could be donated to those in need. The resolution comes not with blood or triumph, but with the mutual recognition that you've all participated in something that defies categorization. You and Pemberton lower your spoons simultaneously, the gesture carrying more weight than any sword salute in history. The crowd holds its breath, unsure whether to applaud or prepare for sudden violence. Lord Pemberton, you say formally, I acknowledge that my comment about your wig was spoken in haste and poor judgment. Though it does resemble woodland fauna, I see now that this may be intentional styling. Mr. Henderson, Pemberton responds with equal gravity. I accept your almost apology and acknowledge that choosing spoons was either the greatest insult or the greatest kindness anyone has ever shown me. I'm still not sure which. Neither am I, you admit. Thomas steps forward with the marmalade jar, like a priest with communion wine. Gentlemen, perhaps we should seal this reconciliation with breakfast. What follows is perhaps the strangest peace ceremony in dueling history. The vendor is called forward with his remaining soup. The crowd produces various breakfast items from seemingly nowhere. Apparently, half of London came prepared for a picnic. Someone finds a tablecloth, another contributes bread. The ladies with opera glasses reveal they've been sitting on a basket of scenes this entire time. You and Pemberton sit at the impromptu breakfast table, still holding your spoons, now repurposed for their intended function. The first sip of soup using your dueling weapon carries unexpected significance. Around you, the crowd settles on the grass, sharing food and increasingly embellished accounts of what they've witnessed. To spoons, someone toasts with a flask. To stupidity, another adds. To Tuesday mornings that make no sense. A third contributes. Master Chin joins your table, accepting soup with philosophical calm. In my country, we say, the warrior who defeats his enemy is strong, but the warrior who makes his enemy breakfast is stronger. We don't actually say this. I just made it up, but we should. The journalist approaches with his notebook. Gentlemen, how would you like this recorded? As a duel, a performance, the birth of a new sport? You and Pemberton exchange glances over your soup. Yes, you say simultaneously. As the morning progresses, the gathering transforms from aftermath to celebration. The artist sells quick sketches to commemorate the event. The vendor takes advance orders for dueling breakfast soup. Someone suggests making this an annual event, though everyone agrees it would lose something if planned. You know, Pemberton muses, adjusting his wig, which has achieved an even more dramatic angle. I spent £40 on this hairpiece. £40 for something that looks like taxidermy. Why, you ask? genuinely curious now that murder is off the table. Fashion, he sighs. My wife said it made me look distinguished. Distinguishable, certainly. That's what I said. But apparently, looking like everyone else but slightly more so is the height of sophistication. The conversation meanders through fashion, philosophy, and the surprising aerodynamics of spoons. You learn that Pemberton is actually quite pleasant when not defending his questionable style choices with cutlery. He learns that you're prone to panic-induced creativity and have strong opinions about stirring direction. We should write a manual, Pemberton suggests after his third bowl of soup. Codify what we've created. The Gentleman's Guide to Spoon Combat. Chapter 1. Don't. You suggest. Chapter 2. But if you must, confuse everyone, he adds. Chapter 3. When in doubt, spin. Thomas, who's been documenting everything, looks up from his notes. I've actually been writing down all the moves you invented. The soup swirl, the dessert dash, the parliamentary pudding thrust. That name's not sticking, Pemberton interrupts. It's already stuck. I heard 3 people practicing it. As the sun climbs toward noon, the crowd begins to disperse, each taking with them a story that will grow more elaborate with each telling. By evening, London will buzz with tales of the great spoon duel. By week's end, you'll be legends. By year's end, historians will argue about what really happened. But for now, you sit in a field, sharing breakfast with a man you tried to fight with cutlery. Your spoon, the one Mrs. Pembroke lent you, bears tiny scratches from combat. It was never designed for. You'll return it, of course, but suspect she'll display it proudly. The spoon that survived Hampstead Heath. Same time next year, Pemberton jokes, raising his soup bowl in salute. God, no, you reply. Next time someone insults my appearance, I'm just going to say thank you. Wise policy, though I might keep practicing the spoon techniques. You know, just in case. In case of what? In case England ever needs defending with cutlery. Everyone laughs, because what else can you do when you've spent a morning discovering that, with enough commitment, even the stupidest idea can become magnificent? The crowd fades like morning mist, leaving only memories and the faint scent of soup. Tomorrow, London will wake to its usual rhythms of commerce and propriety. But today, for one shining moment, 2 men with spoons reminded everyone that dignity is optional, honor is negotiable, and sometimes the best way to resolve a conflict is to make it too ridiculous to continue. You and Pemberton part with a handshake and mutual promises to never speak of this again, which you both know you'll break immediately. The spoons are cleaned and returned to their drawers, where they'll sit among their mundane siblings, holding secrets of their brief career as weapons. Walking home through streets that seem oddly normal after your morning's adventure, you reflect on what you've learned, not about combat or honor or even spoons, but about the human capacity to find meaning in absurdity, to create rules for games that don't exist, and to transform potential tragedy into certain farce. Your landlady greets you at the door, noting your disheveled appearance with raised eyebrows. Rough morning, Mr. Henderson? You could say that. Mrs. Pembroke, how was your spoon? She examines it carefully. noting the battle scars with interest. It seems to have stories to tell. It does indeed, though I'm not sure anyone would believe them. Oh, I don't know, she says with a knowing smile. London's believed stranger things. Cup of tea? Please, but I'll stir it myself. I've had enough spoon-related excitement for one lifetime. As you settle into your chair, exhausted but oddly exhilarated, you realize that you've survived something remarkable. Not a duel, exactly. Not a performance, precisely. But something uniquely human, the transformation of fear into folly, conflict into collaboration, and breakfast utensils into instruments of enlightenment. The city continues its daily dance outside your window. Carriages clatter past, vendors hawk their wares. Life goes on, blissfully unaware that this morning, on a misty heath, two men with spoons accidentally invented something unnecessary and somehow essential. You close your eyes, teacup warm in your hands, and smile. You survived a duel with zero skills and a spoon. More importantly, you discovered that sometimes the best victory is the one where everyone wins by losing together. In the distance, church bells chime noon, London carries on, and somewhere across the city, Lord Pemberton is probably practicing the soup swirl, just in case, just in case. And now, as the morning's strange adventure settles into memory like sugar dissolving in tea, let your own breathing slow to match the gentle rhythm of an ordinary afternoon. The spoons are back where they belong, safe in their drawers, their brief moment of glory already fading into legend. Tomorrow's worries can wait their turn. Tonight, there's only the soft comfort of knowing that somewhere in this vast world, two grown men once faced their fears with nothing but determination and dessert cutlery. The absurdity of it all makes everything else seem manageable by comparison. So let that thought carry you forward, past the fading echoes of clashing silver, beyond the laughter of crowds that have long since dispersed. Rest now, knowing that if someone could survive a duel with a spoon, you can survive whatever tomorrow brings. The city sleeps around you, dreaming its thousand different dreams, and you're safe here in the quiet darkness, where the only battles are fought in imagination and the only weapons needed are patience and hope. Close your eyes, breathe deep, and remember, sometimes the greatest victories come not from strength or skill, but from the simple courage to face the impossible with whatever you have to hand. Even if it's just a spoon, sweet dreams, brave soul, until our next strange adventure together.